Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of People's Perspectives. I started this podcast just so we can gather some perspectives from different industries, from people who've seen different things around the world. And today, on the first episode, I'm going to be talking with my friend Connor, who's traveled all over the world. He's gone to Colombia, he's gone to Europe, he's gone to Morocco, all these really cool places. So I'm going to be talking to him, gathering different perspectives that he's gotten while in all of his travels, some things, some fundamentals that everybody have in common. It's a really, really good interview. I really hope everybody watches the entire thing and let me know what you guys think. This is my first one, and I really want some feedback, positive or negative. Doesn't really matter to me. And with all that being said, enjoy. And alrighty, everyone, welcome to the first episode of People's Perspectives. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with my friend Connor. We've been friends since high school. He's a super cool dude. He's seen a lot of super cool things all over the world, and he has some great perspectives. And without further ado, Connor, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm a student at Western University in my third year of studies. Um, I guess I would say I'm a traveler. Like to see different things, constantly be doing something different and talking to different people, and learning about the world in the process of things.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. He's very focused on the process and how things happen, which is when you see multiple things all around the world, I think is super cool. And for a lot of us, a lot of people who are watching this, who, we're kind of like trapped in our homes, we don't really see a lot of outside perspectives. I think it's super cool. Connor, like, can you just list off a few places that you've traveled? And for everybody listening, he did all of this before 21, considering last year was the pandemic. He did all of this before 21 and he's seen some really cool places.
Right after I graduated, I was inspired by an uncle of mine who finished high school and then went off and traveled the world, went to see a bunch of different places and different things. So as soon as I graduated school, I got a job, saved as much money as I could, bought myself a backpack, and flew to Europe. And so 2 months after I graduated, I traveled through, starting in England, then going through Spain, and worked my way to Eastern Europe and kind of finished off in Poland, Ukraine, flew back to Spain, and then went up to Northern Africa and traveled through Morocco for a couple weeks. Climbed the tallest mountain, or the second tallest mountain in continent of Africa, called Mount Tubkal. And then after that, came home and worked a little bit more, saved some more money, and decided to go back to South America this time, continue traveling and backpacking. So I went to Peru, Panama, and spent about a month in Colombia.
Honestly, like a lot better than probably I will ever be able to achieve in my entire life. And it's just so cool because like you're not only seeing like one particular country and then a country right adjacent to it. You're seeing like different parts of Europe all over there. You're seeing different parts of South America, seeing different parts of Africa. And I think that's super, super cool. When you were traveling, is there one thing, like any commonality within just the native people of whatever country or continent or wherever situation you were in? Was there any commonalities and people's perspectives, anything that you noticed that was similar?
Frankly, I would say that the biggest takeaway I got out of traveling, meeting different people, and seeing different perspectives, and just talking to different people, is that everybody's the same. Humanity as a whole creates individuals that are blank slates at the start of their life, but become shaped by the cultures that they grow up in, the people that surround them, the opportunities that are presented to them. And truthfully, I think that if you get down to it, a lot of people can disagree. However, everybody's really the same. After meeting so many different people, similar values are held close to the heart: caring for family, love, money. Everyone truthfully kind of boils things down to the same sorts of values. And then beyond that, I think everybody that I have met has had the capacity to do absolutely anything. And I think that's true for all humans. Anyone can do absolutely anything so long as they're interested in achieving it and working very hard to break through the walls that could stop them in the process. And so I would say the commonality is just that people in and of themselves are the same. The way they act, the things they care for, very similar from country to country, from peoples to peoples. It's very interesting to see.
Yeah, I honestly, I completely agree. And I actually had a conversation with one of my friends about this as well, that I think at a foundational level, a lot more people would realize that they all agree on a lot of very very similar things. Like we all agree at like loving each other's family and friends. We all agree at like at the end of the day, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to enjoy what they're doing. And I think that's very true. And I think like a lot of people don't realize that like people who live in like Vancouver or Canada or anywhere here probably have the same fundamentals as somebody who might live in Northern Africa, who might live in Peru or some places like that. And I think when people realize and just kind of like boil things down to a basic level, and you kind of cancel out all the excitement and all the details and everything like that, people would realize that we can actually get along in a much better way and we can probably gather the same perspectives, but maybe just from a different viewpoint. And so noticing like you went through different parts of Europe, and obviously there's parts of Europe that are kind of very similar to our society, and then there's other parts of Europe that are maybe they have a different following or they go a different direction than what we would traditionally do out here. Was there anything that you saw through your travels that you didn't think about before you went off?
Hmm, really good question. Certainly have to think about that. I would say, and I think a lot of people come out of traveling and say this, that I didn't expect people to behave certain ways. I heard a good saying um, from something called the Last Lecture, Randy Pausch, and he says, "Wait and wait and see, because people will always give you their best. As long as you're patient, you're going to see the best out of people, and you're going to eventually get their best, and they're going to give something to you." And it's very interesting to see. I remember I was in Morocco, which is kind of like the cultural capital of, or sorry, not Morocco, but Marrakesh, the capital of Morocco. And I was traveling through the country there, and I was trying to get to this really isolated, super small town, and I ran out of money. I had absolutely no money, and it wasn't in the same sense that I would kind of expect to run out of money here. Like I had money, but I didn't have any cash, and so I was up in this mountainous town in the middle of nowhere, probably like 4 or 5 hours from the closest like big city where there's like bank tellers and electricity and electronics and things along those lines. So I was in this very kind of fundamental, basic town at the base of the Atlas mountain range. And it was kind of Mount Toubkal is the mountain I was talking about. And I just ran out of money, and I went to like a hostel, and I was like, I have no money. I can do my best to pay you and send money to you later, but like, is there any way that you can like do anything for me? Like, I really like to accomplish this. And I never would have expected that people would just be so open and welcoming and generous to someone that they didn't know. And it's certainly trusting. I
Hmm.
wouldn't have expected that because there's no connection, no motivation for these people to do it other than the fact that I asked for help and they gave help. And that's one of the big things is got to ask for help. I
Yeah,
didn't realize this, that people are
yeah.
so willing to give whatever you need and whatever is best for you to help, even if they're a stranger.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of people do want to help, and when they are able to help, a lot of times they will, but sometimes you need to ask for that help. Sometimes that needs to be presented to somebody else because maybe they didn't know you didn't have any money. Maybe they thought you had a huge wealth, and maybe they had a different perspective on the situation, but you went up to them and you were very transparent, very genuine, and just saying that like, hey, look, this is my situation, is there anything you can do? And I think that's great because you never know, maybe somebody through their lives have provided kind of the same situation for them, and they're just paying it forward. And I think that's one thing that moving towards the more positive place to live in, a more positive world to live in, the paying it forward kind of method is something that I really think is really, really important. And it's if somebody's done a good deed for you, why don't you do a good deed for somebody else? And just like you said, it's not like this was just another city in the province or the country that you live in. Like this is another continent completely on the other side of the world, and they're still able to provide and still able to empathize with you and seeing that like, hey, look, this guy's struggling a little bit, but he's still genuine and saying, hey, look, when I will pay you back, that when I have the chance to, like, that's definitely going to happen. I think that's really, really cool. And I think like, how was the rest of your journey beyond that point?
Really cool. It was actually, I showed up at this hostel. I was the only one there. It was December, probably 10th, and it had just started snowing when I got into town. So I kind of settled in, put my things away, and went to go out. And I went to go find a restaurant or something. And I went to the gentleman at the front desk who was the owner of the place. And I said, "Where can I go find something to eat?" And he said, "There's there's nowhere for you to go. There's no restaurants here. You're in the middle of nowhere." And so we ended up sitting down together, and he said, "Why don't you just come have dinner with me and my family?" And so they cooked this big, I think it was called a calabash. And it's like this big stone pot that's like a triangle at the top, and they just throw it in the fire. And there was like lamb and curry in there, and it was incredible. Like they just put it in there, and I didn't realize like communication is very infrequently only about words. I had little understanding of any of the languages that are spoken in Morocco. They speak French. They speak a little bit of, oh my gosh. Anyways, I can't remember right now, but they speak three predominant languages in the country. And I don't speak any of them. I speak a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of English, lot of English.
A lot of English, eh?
And it's interesting to find that you can kind of get on with someone, figure it out, talk to someone, and just like various things kind of stay the same. I remember being there and I was going to climb the mountain in the morning, so I needed to eat as much as I could. And they were very generous to like give me the last little bit of food and things like that. When you're at the end of a bag of chips,
Yeah.
you share the last couple chips with somebody, or you share the last slice of cake with somebody. And they gave me the last couple pieces of bread and food to nourish myself. And it's interesting that those things stay the same. And even though you're in a foreign place and with foreign people and seeing scenery you haven't seen before, they are willing to
I,
give
I
family.
I think that's awesome. A question that I had, just considering that you went to places where I know there was a lot of other tourists as well, and then you went to places like this where, essentially you're in the middle of nowhere and there's not much there. Did you notice a huge difference in the genuineness of just the town, the culture when you were in a place that was maybe a little bit, let's consider it discarded to tourists and place like that versus somewhere where maybe it's a capital of tourism and there's lots of people and there's lots of people from all over the world, just the level of genuineness from just the whole environment there. Did you happen to notice anything?
Uh, I heard a good perspective on this, and I think it's really interesting to bring up the fact that people always think if you're in Paris, Paris or Parisians are not very friendly. And that's because of the fact that people are interested, like self-interested. They want to protect themselves. And so when you're in like these big cities that tourists come through constantly, 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 a simple restaurant owner, an owner of a store, or someone you meet on the street is less likely to invest into you, invest their time, invest their energy because they have seen so many people come and go. So it's more along the lines that it's not that they're not genuine, it's just that they're protecting themselves, I think. Because
Hmm.
it's such a common thing in life that you have people that come through your life so often, and they come into your life and they leave your life. And there's many people that these connections are just fleeting. They're short. They take a little bit of your energy, they take a little piece of you, and perhaps you make a memory true, but you never get more from it. And so I think specifically in like tourist cities, it's interesting to look at that aspect of humanity and people and how they protect themselves. And so
Hmm.
I think it's not that they're not genuine. It's just that they know that people aren't going to be there for very long. So they don't want to give a piece of themselves and a piece of kindness for a connection that's only going to last a moment. And
Yeah.
so often the people that come into their lives, perhaps they're not the friendliest or the kindest, and they're more than willing, if you are to invest your time and your energy into getting to know someone, they'll reciprocate that.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting.
And
Could,
so
yeah.
I was going to say, just to continue
Yeah,
on with
go ahead.
that, and so when you go to a smaller town, I would say what those people consider to be normal is it's a small town, there's few people there, everyone knows everyone, and everyone stays for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
There's not so many people that are flowing through there and changing. And so when you go to a small town, you get to more intimately and deeply and quickly connect with those people. Yeah, that's
No,
that's
no, I
my
like that. I think that's right. Because if you see 1,000 people a year and you're trying to give like the same level of appreciation or love or whatever that is, it's not going to be valued as high as maybe if you wait for somebody who's going to stick around for a little bit longer. You guys can engage, be a little bit more intimate in your discussions. I think that's really cool. When you were traveling through everywhere, was there a certain place that there was a common consensus that it was a really cool place to go and a really different perspective outside of just traditional tourism? I can't think of anything in particular, but a certain city that you would have liked to go to in the future, or anything that kind of just kept coming up, which is like, you need to go here and this is why.
Are you thinking more a country that I've like already been to and want to go back to, or some place I've heard of and would like to go?
Let's do both. Which country would, like, if you could tomorrow go to a country because you loved the presence of being there, what country would that be?
Colombia,
Colombia?
without a doubt. I actually had to trick my mom to go there. She would live it. She's like, Colombia? You mean you're joining the Colombian drug cartel? And I was like, no, mom, I'm not, but I'm going to Colombia. So my mom and I are chatting. She traveled with me to Peru. And then afterwards, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go off by myself for a little bit now. So she drops me off at the airport. She gets on her flight. And I'm like, see you later, mom. My flight to Chile leaves in an hour. Little does she know, I left the fucking airport, went back to the hotel, stayed for a week, and then flew to Colombia. And so my mom was like, oh my God, mom, Chile's beautiful. You'd love this place. Little does she know. And so, anyways, I got on a plane, went to Colombia. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the country. Like, I think people think it's more dangerous than it is, or the people are less friendly than they are. It is absolutely true that they have gone through political, gang related, drug related, like strife and warfare, and there's been a lot of that in the country. However, over the past 10 years, they have a prime minister who's in power now who is not illegitimately there. It's kind of like the first real election that they have someone in power who's willing to do the work, do the time, and improve the country. And so, interestingly enough, actually, a lot of the drug cartels have actually left Colombia and moved to like Argentina across, or sorry, not Argentina across the border, but Venezuela, as well as Peru. So Colombia is much more safe than it was previously. And I went to Medellin, which I have to say is the most incredible city I've ever been to in my life.
I really want to go there in the future, honestly.
It's incredible. So I remember I took a bus from Bogota, which is the capital of the country, and so this bus kind of like wound up these steep little switchback roads into another city where the actual coffee plantations are. There's a lot of coffee grown in Colombia. They've kind of transitioned away from cocaine, a little bit more coffee.
A little bit more coffee. Still a C word, just a different one.
Exactly.
Still a stimulant, but little different.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I do say that, but when they were growing like coca plants or cocaine, which is used to make cocaine, it's actually done in the like forest area. Like there's part of the Amazon rainforest runs up the kind of like southeastern side of the country. And so that's where a lot of the drug cartels move and traffic all the goods and stuff along those lines. So the rest of the country, except for kind of that fringe area that's kind of close there, the small towns, is relatively safe. It is very safe, actually. And Medellin 10 years ago was the murder capital of the world. It was named the least safe city in the world because there was just so much cartel activity there. And now they've rebuilt the city, and it's super interesting to see because you can tell that it's so that you drive into the city is what I was going to get to, and there's these gigantic hills going up both sides. So there's mountains going up the left side, going up the right side, and you're driving down this valley in the middle. And a lot of Colombia's like that. And that's what makes it such an interesting country, and a country that's very successful to run illegal operations because the terrain is so difficult to traverse. So it's difficult to police. And so that's kind of like what led to the unsafeness of the country. And but on the flip side, it leads to the fact that that is what makes the country so beautiful. And so, like, when I was going into the country and going into the city, I was like, this is the most stunning place I've ever seen. And then it's interesting to kind of go in. I stayed in the tourist district, which is really vibrant and lively and tons of colorful and so much character. And it's just a melting pot of different peoples. And so this was one of the most horrifying days of my life, actually.
Oh,
I arrived in Medellin, which I was like, all I know is that there was a lot of murders here 10 years ago. And so I got there at I think about 1 or 2 in the morning. My bus got off and I walked around, tried to find a hostel, found a hostel, totally booked. And again, oh my gosh, I run out of money all the time in my travel. So I ran out of money again. And I was like, I got to get an Uber. So I got an Uber. I got someone to taxi me around. And I was like, I only got $5. Take me as far as you can. And he's like, I think this is a bad idea. And I was like, I don't have any money. I can't do anything. And so he like drove me halfway and he's like, good luck. See you later. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to walk there. And I ended up walking there and the people were friendly. So I was super happy. So I walked to this hostel, found a place to live, and stayed there for about a week. And it was super interesting because the next day, a couple of my friends arrived in town. And when that happened, we went on this walking tour. And we walked through the downtown city. And it's a very like there's lots of different tourist areas there. But the most interesting thing is the people's pride for their infrastructure. So over the past 10 years, they built like a SkyTrain and they built like buses and stuff like that that go out all along the city. And they also have trams that are like kind of like the Hell's Gate one, or I can't remember what they're called, but they'll take you up to the mountain villages. So it connects because it's filled with mountains and there's houses riddled on the side of the mountains.
mm-hmm.
And so it connects those houses up in the mountains to the city. And so what created it as a safer city and what stopped the drugs and stuff like that is the problem was the towns that were up on the hills were isolated and they couldn't get down to the main city to get jobs. So young people would be brought into the drug cartels and given jobs by the drug cartels. They were the biggest employer in the city. And this is a gigantic city. There's millions of people that live there. And so as soon as they created an infrastructure that connected the city together to the center, to the heart of it, then these people started coming down to the city and getting jobs. And so it's so interesting to see the contrast between sky trains and buses and stuff like that in different cities and in this city. It's immaculate. It's sparkling clean. And this is in a city that's quite impoverished. And the biggest attraction to the city and what draws me back to it to this day is the people. They're so proud. They're so happy because they've seen this transformation in the country and the city that they're living in. And they just love it. They're so proud of themselves. They're so happy to have tourists there. It's kind of like what you said. It's different than like going to Paris when Parisians aren't as friendly. Whereas if you go here, they love tourists because it's what's creating a legal, healthy economy. And in contrast to that, it's really interesting to see how the city now lives with all these monuments of death and drugs and the remnants of the cartel. There's a square we went to, and there was a massacre there like 10 years ago where 30, 40, 50, 60 people were shot down and killed by the drug cartels.
Hmm.
And now there's people dancing in the square, and they filled it and changed it and filled it with this vibrant life. And so it's just fascinating to see a people's entirely rejuvenated and to see excitement and vibrance and so much happiness in the air there. And so that's what
I
draws me back there. It's just an atmosphere of a resilient peoples who really fought to live in a fine place. So that's one place I'll definitely go back to.
I think that's great because it's hard. Like
Mm.
Colombia 10, 15, 20 years ago was, I think we both know, not the best place to go. And to have that pride, just a total pride of the country to come together and be like, we need to change this. We need to do better for not only ourselves, but the entire country. And what about my children and my children's children? Like, we want to build something sustainable that's positive, and that's super cool. I didn't realize that they had such an advanced infrastructure because
Mhm.
known from where they came from, that's absolutely amazing, especially to do it in such a short time too. And to realize that, hey, look, maybe the best thing to combat all the cartels and stuff like that's maybe not the police force. Maybe it's let's change the perspective of the people who are going to join the drug cartels and say, hey, look, we can maybe bring you into the city and get you a legal job that's a bit safer, and we'll provide that transportation for you. I think that's so cool that especially in such a short time, everybody can come together on a common goal and realize, hey, look, this has to change,
Mhm.
and this has to change in order for us to have a better life.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool. Um, I
Yeah.
think that's so cool that people they don't dwell in the fact like what you said with the square that where there was a massacre. Some people would dwell and be like a little intimidated or scared to kind of maybe push a positive light in that situation that was obviously extremely negative. And the fact that you said, people are dancing around, they're positive. I think even though it was such a negative situation, I think those people who unfortunately died in that situation would have wanted a positive outcome, something similar to that. And I think that's so cool. You and I had never had that conversation before. I That's super super cool to me. Um, thank you for sharing that. That was really really cool to hear. Um, do you have an idea of where Colombia might be continuously going in the future? Are they continuing on the infrastructure? Are they maybe focusing on education or anything like that in particular? Do you notice anything moving forward that they're focusing on?
I think I think there's a valuable lesson to kind of take away from what that is, and then I'll kind of lead to kind of what's happening is I think it's really interesting to, if you look at it, the problem in Colombia was the drug cartels and the fact that they were a major employer. The problem wasn't the fact that there was drug cartels. The problem was the fact that at the root of it, there weren't enough jobs for people.
Hmm.
Jobs were created by illegal markets. And so for Colombia and for people in general, I think it's like the valuable lesson is figure out the root of the problem and address it. Don't attack symptoms of an illness, attack the actual illness itself. And so they've gone on to now create jobs, create infrastructure, create an economy that can build by itself. And that's kind of in line with what they're doing. By putting figures that are legitimate into power, they can put money to good use. They can put less money to the forces that are fighting the actual like fight. And so the idea of what happened like 3 years ago, which was really, really cool, is what used to be the drug cartel and the militia fighters. So there's three kind of major groups in Colombia. There was the political party, then there was the second was the drug cartel itself, and then there was these guerrilla warfare fighters. I think it's called FARC or FARC. You can
Yeah,
look into that,
first, yeah.
and they're the third party. And so what happened in instead of just like attacking the drug cartel, because the drug cartel actually had like some political ideologies and ideas, they made them a legitimate legal party in the political system.
The drug cartels.
Yeah. So they made them a political party, which gave them an opportunity to use their voices in saying what they're actually trying to do. And which the problem was that there's not enough jobs in Colombia. And so by bringing these people into the conversation, they were able to kind of address numerous problems that were there. The illegal activities, which is slowly moving out of the country, creating more jobs, creating an infrastructure to connect cities, because it is a really complicated country. It's super mountainous. The terrain is difficult to traverse. Like there's certain portions of the country that you cannot get there. And if you do want to get there, it's probably going to take you a week. Colombia is about the same size as British Columbia. So that's a lot to say. It's very, very much the same, like Colombia and British Columbia. Like Columbia, British Columbia itself is named after Colombia because of the similarities in the terrain, the mountains, the ocean, all of those things. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And where they're going in the future is, it seems, legitimacy, like addressing actual problems and creating solutions for them, creating more jobs, building the infrastructure, and it kind of all ties together.
I think that's great. And interesting point you mentioned with they made the drug cartels a political party. And I think a lot of people, especially where we are, would think that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, how dare you give power to people that are doing so many negative, harmful situations? But how are you going to know how to fix the situation without trying to talk to the other side, without trying to grasp the other perspective? And I notice with like a lot of things that we have here, whether if it's political stuff to do with COVID or anything like that, there's no discussion. And if there's any discussion, you're having discussions with somebody with the exact same ideas as you, and therefore it's not really a discussion; it's just a reiteration of what you already know. And I think that's really cool because who knows, maybe the Colombian government, whoever's in power now, would have had no idea how to handle the proper situation if they never made those people a political party or never heard their voice. Even though they were doing a lot of harm, you were still able to give them a chance to be like, hey, look, this is kind of what needs to happen in order to move more in a positive direction.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I do want to clarify. If there's any mistakes in what I say, I don't hold me to it. I am a couple years out from learning all of this stuff and visiting the place. So
Oh yeah, no, of course. I'm sure if somebody fact checks, yeah, we'll know that. But that's so cool. A place that you want to go, a place that you've heard a lot about, or that's just in the back of your mind that you really want to go to, and what do you think you would get out of that experience?
um, probably two places for totally different reasons. I would love to go to either Chile or Argentina so that I could hike around in Patagonia. It's stunning.
Yeah,
Just one of the most beautiful places in the world. So that's one of them. But the bigger kind of pull or desire or urge I have to travel is India. I would love to go to India. And I know it's a country that's off putting from many. And I definitely don't want to go for the same reasons that most people do. Don't really care about seeing the Taj Mahal. I don't really care about seeing kind of the most poignant aspects of it, but I'm very interested in the people there. There's hundreds of different languages spoken, hundreds of different languages within every city. And it's just a melting pot of so many different interesting cultures and religions and peoples. And right now, it's very important to note the fact that there's major protests going on there.
yeah.
No expert in it, but it's a complicated country and they've got some fundamental problems that haven't entirely been sorted out. And there's two really dominant religions there, Sikhs and Muslims, and different ethnicities, like people from Pakistan, and it's really, really complicated. After like the India-Pakistani war, which was probably like 50 years ago now, there's now Pakistani people living there that are marginalized and treated unfairly. The farmers are being treated unfairly, and I think it's a country that has so much to offer and interestingly does so much for the rest of the world, but we really don't see them as like their own peoples. Like so much of our spices and stuff like that are made by the farmers there.
Hmm.
And additionally, all of our call centers, whenever we have to make a call or we have any problems with anything, they're all done in India. And so it's a country that is very prevalent in our everyday lives, but unseen and unheard. And so I don't think that I've had the opportunity to experience or understand fully what it's like in this country. And so I really want to have kind of just a root understanding of what the people are like. And my desire to go there is mostly inspired by this book I read called Shantaram. Gregory David Yates wrote it, and it's about his journey and immigration to the country. He was the most wanted man in Australia for like hits and runs, and he escaped prison. He escaped prison, got on a plane, and went to Mumbai or Bombay, which is now Mumbai, um, and lived there and just lived in the slums of the country and found that the people that lived in the slums were the kindest, most friendly people, but constantly had to work through tragedy and just havoc. Like they would have diarrhea, for example, just run rampant through these like impoverished areas. And so he became the medic of the area and just helped take care of the people. And the most interesting thing was that there was like 100 families that would live in this kind of like homeless tent city, I guess you would call it. But these like little shacks were their homes. And he became a part of it. And the interesting thing was that the way they lived there, it was very communal, and everyone took care of everyone no matter what. And I think that's really, really cool. And I'd like to be a part of that, or just to see that, or to help some of those people, because there's lots of death and they're not doing as good as they could be.
I you're totally right. Not a lot of people realize that like things like diarrhea in a lot of other places in the world is extremely deadly. Like diarrhea is one of the leading causes of death for children in non-first world countries. And I think like we don't think about that. Like we think
Yeah.
diarrhea like, oh, take this medicine or eat a banana or whatever. To them it's holy crap, like as a parent, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my child.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because we don't think about that, but it's situations like that for them that might say, "Hey, look, we need to come together as a group. We have to have a common goal yet again." And it's just trying to make sure everybody's happy, healthy, moving in a positive direction. I think when your life's extremely simple, which in certain places in India, very simple life, not a lot of, extreme technologies, not a lot of outside noises and stuff like that, people come together when life's a little bit more simple. And I think that comes back to like what you were saying earlier is at a foundational level, people are very, very similar.
Yeah.
And honestly, like India is one of those places for me as well that I'm like, it'd be a good place to go, not where the tourists go. Kind of grasp a different level because you're right. They provide so much for us on a global level that we don't understand. And I think it'd be great for people to gather the perspectives out there that maybe we don't quite understand.
And a nod to the idea of like diarrhea and infancy death and things along those lines. This is something that I'm coming to grips with now, but in those countries, it's interesting the different relationships with death. A
Mhm.
first world country living in the idea of death is that we fight against death. That's the last thing that we want. It's the saddest thing that happens in our life. It's the most painful thing that happens in our life, and it's the thing we want the least.
No acceptance for it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Whereas in those countries, they grapple with it constantly. And death is at the forefront of everything that they do. It's so simple. You can nick yourself on a screw and die.
Mhm.
They don't have tetanus shots, for example, to fight against infections or rust or steel or any of those simple things. You get a simple stomach bug and you die from diarrhea. And I think it ties to the fact of being conscious that death is inevitable and is at the forefront of your life is a really good way to live in the present moment. And that's something that not many people do. And I think it's something that would bring a lot more happiness to us. And the book that I read depicted like how these people did live with more happiness, with more fullness in their lives because they come to grips with some of these simple concepts. Like they're going to die, people are going to die around them, and they don't get as sad when people die, but they cherish the fact that they lived. And while they're living, they know they're going to die. So they choose to live. They choose to not waste moments on social media, scrolling through Instagram, doing shit that just
Doesn't matter.
bogs down your brain.
Mhm.
And so the biggest thing that kind of I've been thinking of recently and it is like kind of my mantra is I'm going to die. I'm okay with that. It will happen when it happens and it'll happen no other time. In the meantime, make sure I'm alive, make sure I'm thinking, make sure I'm conscious, enjoying and feeling and absorbing the moment so that when I do die, the life was worthwhile.
I think that's super powerful. I think if people spent a lot more time focusing on how to live rather than how to live longer,
Mhm.
people would be a lot happier. And on the flip side, they'd probably live longer because the happier you are, the more passion and the more desire you have to live.
Yeah.
And we all know when in first world countries and in our society, one of the biggest causes of death is stress.
Mm.
And I think part of that stress is what you said, people don't accept death and people are afraid of death and you know they'll do certain things to try to avoid death and there's one thing for certain in this world: we're all going to die, and that's the only guarantee that I think we have. And I think that's super cool. I think if people accepted that, hey, look, death is one of those things that it's going to happen, and I'm okay with that, and I'm just going to try to live. I'm going to try to make an impact. I'm going to try to do what I need to do to live a happy life for me and the people that I love. I think the world would be a much better place. And I think that's super cool. I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, I really hope people can kind of move more into that direction of thinking. I think that's extremely powerful.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, uh, I think that is probably one of the great places to leave this conversation off of. I just have one question in all your traveling and with what you just said. If you have one piece of advice for people just listening, moving forward, let's say they're going through a negative time or something like that, a piece of advice that you've picked up on or that you're developing on with yourself that might help change their perspective on the situation.
Mhm. I think that's the big one that I've been thinking of recently, but alongside it, I'm really working on and trying to always accept people for who they are. Don't worry about don't worry about them. Worry about yourself. Don't
Mhm.
throw stones when you live in a glass house and take the time to listen to somebody before you actually respond to somebody. The only way you can learn in this world is if you listen to someone's full sentence, tell them, that's interesting. Let me think about that. Think about it, and then go about your way. I think it's really important to listen and to accept that people are very different. And there's reasons for everything that happens in everyone's life. And while doing all that, just smile. Smile at
Sm-
people. Be kind.
Smile, be happy, be kind.
All those simple things.
I think that's so true. I think context is a very important thing when you're trying to understand people. And we've talked about this before. I think a lot of people make judgments when they have very little context. I think if people did a lot more listening, then a lot more thinking or talking or stuff like that, world would be a much better place.
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So do twice as much listening as you do talking.
I got nothing to say to that. Everybody, Connor Pundick, one of the most interesting men I know. I just want to say thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation. It was really great for me, and I really hope everybody listened and enjoyed it as well.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Connor.
Awesome. Everybody have a great rest of their day, and please let me know what you guys thought of this conversation. I think it was really cool personally, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.